Well, folks, today is Veterans Day, and we wanted to tell a veteran's story. And I'm really excited to be able to tell you that there is a new documentary that's coming out about a veteran's story that actually isn't even from, as long ago as 1775 or 1776. In fact, it's just from the last couple of years, because just as America's story has continued, so too has the story of American servicemen and the story of American veterans. And there's a new documentary that's come out telling one of those stories, and I wanted to share that with you. It is called Call Sign Courage, the Matt Lohmeier story. Let's run the trailer.
Being spied on, the chaplain snooping around my office, and my house being broken into. Things like that don't happen on military bases.
The man I'm interviewing today has 1,200 hours of flying the T-38, followed by the F-15C.
Colonel Matthew Lohmeier.
Matthew Lohmeier. Matthew Lohmeier.
This is not just anybody we're talking about that served the military.
Historically, we've been the best in the world because we've always cared about merit. And it's what made the American military the most lethal military on the planet.
The entire military is preparing for a fight against China.
President Xi is the most ideological leader that China's had since Chairman Mao.
Mao said he doesn't need military people. He has an army of indoctrinated kids.
They asked me what my pronouns were, and he thought it was incredible to see that inclusion and change.
We were starting to be divided by political discourse.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white.
That's what diversity, equity, inclusion is all about.
Inclusion and equality are what's important. That's how we'll win our nation's wars.
We are trained Marxists.
Because of forces coming from Marxism within our own government, it becomes not a foreign threat, it becomes a domestic threat.
The base commander was the ideologue who was pushing a particular political agenda. If you're white, you're part of the problem.
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men.
Violent white supremacy.
One of the greatest obstacles to the success of a Marxist revolutionary cause is a strong, united military force. Someone needed to speak up.
Incredible documentary that is out now. You can check it out on Salem Now, salemnow.com. And I'm very excited to be joined here live in studio by the Undersecretary of the Air Force and a veteran himself, in fact, the first veteran of the Space Force. The Honorable Matt Lohmeier joins us. What's up, Matt?
Thanks for having me, Jack. Pleasure to be here.
So your story, going from writing a book the way you did, coming out the way you did, what happened to you, the response from previous administration, and now, I really don't want to make an Air Force pun right here, but soaring to what you've become. What does it feel like? Just going back and kind of, if you had to think about it from I don't know if you fly at 50,000 feet, but maybe the Space Force does.
Almost.
Space Force, yeah, Space Force certainly does, well above. But Neo, Hio, Leo, right?
There you go, yeah.
And
Leo, Mio, Hio,
Geo. Leo, Mio, Hio, Geo, yes.
Right.
I'll get there.
You're getting there.
I'll get there. I got to work on my words again. It's been a minute, but how does it feel having gone through so many ups and downs to now be sitting here today in the position you're in?
You asked a hard question up front. So first off, thank you for having me in.
I did.
You did. There's a lot of feelings. I want to say, I guess, kind of a necessary caveat up front, which you'll appreciate. I didn't come here to promote the film. Thank you for your support for the film. But it is my story. I'm here to talk about veterans and the work we're doing in the Air Force, of course. And I do want to tell you a little bit about how I'm feeling. I'm still trying to process that, actually. I wrote a book, nearly over 4 years ago now, because I saw problems that were dividing the force. And like you or anyone that served in the military, you appreciate the fact that a divided military is not a strong military. You need a united military, in fact. Unity is our strength, not diversity. And the problems that I happened to see at my base were something that I had tried to use all of the appropriate channels from my chain of command to the Inspector General's office to try to tell a story that would hopefully hold activists accountable for political activism in the military workplace. That didn't work, so I wrote a book. You were very supportive back then, by the way, so thank you very much.
It was a great book.
And so I ended up in private life for the last 4 years, which I enjoyed very much. Enjoyed having a full range of the free expression of my views as a private citizen. But ended up meeting President Trump. It's been a little over a year that happened. In fact, 1 year ago today exactly, I was sitting with Pete Hegseth before he was nominated by the president to be the Secretary of Defense. We were in John Rich's bar in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, and we were doing a Fox Nation show on Veterans Day, and he told me he was headed to the White House the very next day to interview for the job that he's currently in. I said, God bless you, good luck with that. That sounds terrible. But he stepped up to the plate, and I was happy to step up when he and the president asked me to come in and do a job for the Air Force. My feelings are, it's exciting. It's daunting. It's been a steeper learning curve than I expected. I speak both Air Force and Space Force, and yet there's a whole lot to learn. And I'm 4 months into the job, and I'm getting the hang of it now.
You know, when I deployed down to Gitmo, I was actually attached to an Army unit, so I like to say I speak a little bit of Army. Like I could say I don't know if I speak Army, but I understand it. Yeah. But of course I speak Navy. I didn't realize that Space Force had already generated its own lingo.
It has its own lingo because it's got.
Or maybe that's what you just explained to me.
It's got its own domain. You know,
that's true.
I had to divorce. I'd flown F-15s. I've been a T-38 instructor pilot.
Right.
You have to kind of divorce yourself a little bit from the air mindset and start thinking about orbital mechanics, LEO, MEO, GEO, the words you're already learning, and you want your operators.
Those are satellite orbits, by the way.
Those are satellite orbits. Yeah, anything you can look up at night, by the way, and see with the naked eye, the moving satellites, the little teeny stars that go slowly across the sky, those are in low Earth orbit, LEO.
So that would be, would that include Starlink, Elon Musk?
Yeah, in fact, if you've had a chance to see Starlink, you'll see those things transitioning up into space, big train of lights that are going up there. Anything beyond LEO, you're not going to be able to pick up with the naked eye. People mistake what we have in LEO for other things, but those are satellites, they're reflecting the sunlight. So you get to see a little bit of what's going on in space, but not much. I was just at the Andrews Air Force Base Air Show about a month and a half ago, and you've got people from all over that come in and they pet the jets and they see what the Air Force does, but you can't see what the Space Force does. So our space operators actually need to develop a unique mindset to be able to operate successfully in that domain. So I speak both of those languages, and yet here I am now, a public servant, civilian, political appointee, helping manage the Air Force and frankly, care for the troops, the Airmen and Guardians in the Air and Space Force, by giving them the proper resources to do their jobs, to train properly, the tools that they need to successfully do their mission. It's a daunting task, but it's exciting, and I'm grateful to be here.
How would you say the transition's been going from serving in uniform, as you were a lieutenant colonel, then to civilian life, but now in a leadership of force capacity?
I've had some surprises and also some things I expected. The bureaucracy of the Pentagon is a behemoth. Bob Gates, in his memoir, said he was even shocked when he became Secretary of Defense back in the day. First during, I think, the Obama years, in fact. Maybe it was the Bush administration, then the Obama years, but he was shocked at the bureaucracy, how difficult it is to successfully get done what needs to get done.
I've read Panetta's memoir, and he talks about that as well.
Everyone experiences it. That was a surprise, actually. My love and respect for the troops and what they do on a day-in and day-out basis has been refreshing to experience that firsthand. It's not a surprise to me, but it was a great reminder coming back out of civilian life into this leadership and management capacity to be able to interact with them. And our senior leaders, we have many great senior leaders, despite some of the negative press that we get. Our Air and Space Force leaders, I think, they have my respect. They're trying their best to serve the American people and the President's agenda.
Well, I think that's exactly right. Folks, we are here. It is Veterans Day. We're sitting down in studio on Human Events Daily with Undersecretary of the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier, the first Space Force veteran. You have to stop getting titles, Matt, by the way.
I'm getting a lot of them.
There's too many titles to put out there. He's also, and he's not promoting, but I'm promoting, he is the subject of the new documentary, Call Sign Courage. You can go and get that on salemnow.com. We're going to take a very quick break because when we get back, I want to get into some of the things that you talked about in the book that you put out and some of the things that our military, prior to Secretary Hegseth coming in, had been steering us down, I think, the wrong path, and things that we were doing now to right the ship and correctly orient it towards America's adversaries and America's threats. Yeah, right the ship, right the ship. What can I say? Navy terms are the best terms, as we all know. Be right back. Human Events Daily, New York City, Washington, D.C., Real America's Voice. All right, folks, Jack Posobiec. We are back live here, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. We're here live in studio, and we're honored to be joined by the Honorable Matthew Lohmeier, Undersecretary of the Air Force. And Undersecretary Lohmeier, you wrote this book, and it became the subject of so much information. It became the subject of, it became the impetus for and the catalyst for what made you the first Space Force veteran. What made you want to put pen to paper when you wrote that book?
Frustration with my failed attempts to use the system, a chain of command, and the Inspector General's office to correct political activism in the military workplace. I had attempted for many months to right a wrong that was happening, at least in many cases, poor ethical it was misconduct, and in some cases, in my view, criminal conduct, because we've got law that prohibits discrimination within the military based on race, hiring practices, promotion practices, and so forth. And we had troops that were being targeted in uniform for their accidentals, as it were, the race.
Right.
And I think my chain of command at the time in the Space Force happened to probably agree with me that this was a big problem, but we had created a climate of fear, and we were rendered rather incapable of solving the problem ourselves. And so after my failed attempts, I felt inspired to put pen to paper, as you put it, to write about it in a book as an effort to create dialogue, to bring it to the attention of Congress and the American people. And frankly, I had the troops in mind the entire time. I wanted to educate them specifically about what I knew as the communist or Marxist roots of the current progressive social justice activism that were dividing the military. And we spent an immense amount of blood and treasure during the Cold War fighting this very ideology. To have it just wreck house in this country was a really sad thing and frustrating thing to see. And I knew exactly what it was. Not everyone did. And so I thought, I'm uniquely situated. I have a unique vantage as a commander in the military. I'm going to make this, although it's about a political ideology, it's not intended to be a partisan work. It never was intended. I was later painted as kind of a partisan activist. But I wasn't. I was about keeping partisanship out of the military. That's what motivated me to write the book. And in fact, it generated a dialogue, and I think it's done an important work. It's been valuable.
So, I've also and actually, I you wrote your book prior to mine, but I also wrote a book about communist revolutions. You called yours the Irresistible Revolution, and I think one of the things we were just talking during the break that we both came about was that you saw this in China, but you really saw it in Bolshevik Russia, that one of the first things that the Bolsheviks did when they wanted to recruit was they actually went into the Tsarist army at the time. Now, they're fighting in World War I, so they're on the Eastern Front, they're fighting the Germans, they're fighting the Austrians, but they start going in and they start introducing these justice reforms. And the justice reforms are meant to make the units more equitable. And they would say, well, your unit it's all Russian and ethnic Russian, and you need more Burgyars and Burats and Tajiks and Tatars and all of this, because it's the Russian Empire. They've got all these Central Asian groups, and it almost changed the entire character. It destabilized those units. And then when the unit became a less capable fighting force, they went to that unit and said, you know what, perhaps your real enemy isn't the Germans, perhaps your real enemy is back home in the capital. And I realized, looking at it, saying, my gosh, these aren't similar tactics, these are the same tactics.
Same playbook, same spirit that motivates that work. There is no enemy on this earth. I get to see a really clear picture now as the Undersecretary of the Air Force. We've got incredible airmen and guardians. They've got amazing weapons. We've got an amazing leadership right now under Secretary Hegseth and President Trump. No enemy on this planet is capable of unseating the United States as the great power on the earth. We can undo that ourselves, however, if we start fighting one another, if we start hating one another and demonizing the other, especially in uniform, because we become ineffective. We're distracted, and the mission that we do in the United States military requires a laser-like focus when you're training to do those missions. I just saw, if we've got time to tell a brief story, my first day back as a public servant, I went downstairs. I'd just been read in and I was able to go in and sit down and receive some good and important information about our military operations. I sat down to listen to the planners and those that executed Operation Midnight Hammer in Iran, the strikes that were so well orchestrated. And I was nearly brought to tears, very emotional about the quality of work, the professionalism of these young men and women who flew bombers, flew fighters, flew tankers, did a lot of planning, sacrificed a lot of family time for a number of weeks to bring this together seamlessly and execute a mission that was fraught with peril. And it was just done so well, and that's the United States military. We are just excellent, and you cannot persist in that excellence if you are beset by distractions like diversity trainings, equity trainings. Secretary Hegseth has done a phenomenal job since the very beginning of eliminating those things. And I'll tell you, it's my sense that our troops are very happy that there is a return to a focus on warfighting. That's why they signed up in the first place.
Well, and I can remember in the intelligence community on our side of the house before I got out, I can remember them sort of going around with these sort of like mini pride flags and mini pride like decals. It wasn't the full flag, but like a decal. And he would say, well, you got to put those up at your cubicle or put those up at your desk. And I say, in the spaces. And I say, well, what are those for? Because I'm not, first of all, I'm Catholic. That's and they would say, well, no, this is this is for allies. I said, what do you mean, allies? What's an ally? And they said, well, you put it up to show your support. And I said, well, I don't really feel comfortable putting something like that up. I'm just going to sit at my desk and focus on China. If that's all right with you guys, I'm just not interested. Just I'll pass. And you could see how there was this social pressure that was brought to bear, that if you rejected the display of whatever the cause was, and it wouldn't have anything to do about the issue, it's just about the cause, that suddenly that's a demerit against you, suddenly that's a check against you, and suddenly people start looking at you differently, and people start writing your stuff up differently, and you're sitting there wondering, why aren't we focused on the mission? That's what I'm sitting here doing. That's why I'm learning Mandarin. That's why I focus on all of this, because we want to win. And it seemed like we had totally lost our focus, and this is under Obama, during those years. We'd right back. Quick break here. We're with Lieutenant Colonel Matt Lohmeier, current Under Secretary of the Air Force, live on Human Events Daily, Veterans Day. All right, Jack Posobiec, we're back live here, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. We are on with Undersecretary of the Air Force, Matt Lohmeier. He's here, and he's walking us through his book, The Irresistible Revolution. And it occurs to me, talking about you were depicting and mapping out the issues that you saw within the force when you were in uniform. You get slapped down for that. You become the first veteran of the Space Force. You go into private life. You come back in this capacity. That revolutionary change that we saw going on within the force, where is it now? And what are the initiatives to, I don't want to say right the ship, but I'm going to have to say it. I'm going to have to say right the ship.
All right, I'm learning Navy lingo.
Yeah, I'll get you there.
So I think that your viewers would be well aware of the fact that President Trump comes back into office, issues a number of executive orders that are deliberately targeting these problems within the uniformed services and across all of the federal agencies. In fact, before he left office for his first term in September of 2020, he attempted by executive order to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings from the uniformed services. And so there was a short reprieve there before the next administration had come in. Secretary Hegseth, as the Secretary of Defense, now Secretary of War, has done an outstanding job moving out quickly, executing those executive orders, and each of the services or the departments, and in my case, the Department of the Air Force, have efforts underway and have ever since the beginning of this administration to be very clear in our communication with the force that we're merit-focused, that were standards focused. And you know what's really interesting, and I mentioned this in my book that you brought up, I warn in the book that if we abandon meritocracy and if we abandon a standards-based military, we will see our recruitment numbers plummet and our retention plummet. And that happened. And as soon as the president, this administration, Secretary Hegseth, readjusted the focus to be meritocracy-based, standards-based, what did you see happen with recruitment and retention? It soared. We didn't have a problem for the first time in a number of years meeting our recruiting goals. You've got young men and women all over the country that are excited to come in and serve in the military, and they see that lethality matters and nothing else. We're interested in serving our country, keeping the homeland safe, deterring our enemies abroad, and we've got a serious administration that prioritizes those things. And we want to serve again. We want to serve again. A lot of people reached out over the last few years, not sure if they should serve and wanted my opinion. And now I don't get those questions anymore. I get people excitedly telling me they're signing up and are so happy with how things are going.
It's funny you mentioned that because I had so many people when I do the Turning Point events, and we would have college kids come up, or even sometimes high school kids come up, and they would say, during the previous administration, they would say, I've always wanted to go in, I've always wanted to serve my country, but I'm just not sure because I hear you talk about these things, and heard your book, heard about you, right? Heard your story, and say, does it make sense for me to go in? And what I would always say is this: I would say, do it. I would say, go in, and tell me your opinion on it. But I would always say, go in, because we are going to win. Because I believe common sense is going to win. I believe the military will return to form, and I believe that the right answers will once again take over the leadership. And when that point comes, we are going to need good people that are already there.
Right. Unlike you, I'm not talking about me now, but unlike you, there were, one of the ways in which we get young men and women to even take interest in an all-volunteer force in the first place is that they've got moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas who have all served, aunts and uncles.
Oh, the legacies are
and when you've got
the
an
core
older
of the military.
They are. And when you've got an older generation in particular that does not appreciate the direction that the country is going, that does not appreciate the policy changes within the Defense Department, now War Department, that seem to upend all that they fought for themselves, and the unity that they experienced while they were in uniform, they're not willing to recommend to the next generation military service. And I think we're seeing a change there again.
And that would just shatter the military. That is your core recruiting base, and especially because so many of those kids, when they come through the pipeline, when they're hitting 16, 17, where those prime recruitment ages, if their mom or dad are active duty, they've grown up in the military. They've grown up on post or on base. They've gone to military schools. They've had military health care, et cetera, et cetera. So they're familiar with it. They know it, and this has always been the core draw. I was lived on base for a number of years, and I always used to make a joke about it. I'd say, it's very interesting to me that here on base we have a hospital, we have a daycare, we have an elementary school, we have a high school, we have a MEPS, so you can join the military. Yep. Then we have colleges, we have higher grad, then we have the retirement section, we have the RV trailers, and all the way at the other base we have a cemetery. It's like the whole.
It's its own contained community,
right? Yeah, which is what you want.
That's right.
Which is ultimately what you want, and it was heartbreaking, and by the way, obviously a national security crisis if we broke that system and broke that trust for so many of those generations. That you meet people and it's shocking when they say, "Oh, every generation of my family has served back to the revolution," and but you hear it all the time. You really do hear it all the time. Everyone who serves knows someone like that.
I had, I'm guessing it was a year, it might have been 2, over the past 4 years while I was a civilian. I guess I'm still a civilian, but just. When I was in my private life, after I'd separated, I wondered if the trends continued, we might lose our opportunity to have an all-volunteer force in this country. The trends were bad enough. That was I don't know if everyone would have agreed with that, but as I watched what was happening, I thought, I don't know how many years you keep this up with low recruitment numbers and still avoid a compulsory military service in this country. We've enjoyed over a half century of an all-volunteer force, and I think the trend is headed in the right direction.
I think that's incredible. One of the, and I have to bring this up because one of the people that I know who was so focused on that very issue was someone who was actually appointed to the Board of Visitors for the United States Air Force and had time to conduct one visit out there in Colorado Springs, and that was Charlie Kirk. And Charlie and I spoke many times about how he was so excited, and he'd had an interest in serving earlier in his life. It didn't work out. He ended up doing Turning Point full time, and we all know the story there. But he always had the utmost respect for the military, and I knew that joining the Air Force in even this advisory capacity was so exciting for him. Tragically, he didn't get a chance to see that all the way through, but you told me you had a conversation with Charlie right before he took that visit.
Yeah, we had, so my conversations with Charlie were after his visit to the Air Force Academy in his capacity on the Board of Visitors.
Okay.
But just a couple of days before his assassination. Wow. And we had spoken a couple of times, in fact, and exchanged messages because I'll share with you the two reasons that he was really interested in talking with me about. His love for those cadets. He spent time there getting a tour at the Air Force Academy, spent time with the leadership there. He got to see what cadet life was like, and he got to interact with the men and women that are the future leaders in the Air and Space Force. And he had great respect for them, said they were outstanding and impressive, wanted to ensure that any barriers to their character development and their education were eliminated. That was one thing. And he also took particular interest in the cadet chapel. It's a historic building. It was first finished in 1962. And he was disappointed to see, as are many people, and rightly so, the big white box that sits around the cadet chapel because it's under construction. There's a restoration project that's been underway for many years. And Charlie said, hey, I've just called the president. I've spoken with him a couple of times expressing the need to move out faster and get this restoration project done correctly, because we're going to have 2 generations of young cadets that come through this place and never get to experience or see their cadet chapel. And I appreciated that input, and the Air Force appreciated the input. Already thought that, but to see that there was extra attention, and in fact recently the president even put up a Truth Social post about the chapel. He's paying attention. But the Air Force leadership is moving out with alacrity, trying to get that project done as quickly and as wisely as possible so that we can get our cadets, back in what is the symbol of the spiritual center there of the Air Force Academy. And also all the folks driving down Interstate 25 every day of the week that see just a white box and not the iconic chapel there. So that effort's going well. In fact, I recently took a trip out there to meet with the contractor and Air Force leadership who are in charge of that project to make sure that we get it right, move it left if possible, save as much money as possible moving forward. And I'm optimistic about those conversations. But Charlie cared about getting that right. And that was the last conversation I had about with him, was about that chapel.
There's so many touch points and so many fingers and so many pots that Charlie had. It's just incredible to hear that we're going to carry that out. And I know Charlie would really appreciate that. We'll be right back. Take a quick break here at Human Events Daily. All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back here, and we've been so excited and so blessed on this Veterans Day to have had the time to sit down with the Undersecretary of the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeier. He is the first veteran of the Space Force, and he's the author of the book Irresistible Revolution, and he's been telling us so much about his story and all of the things that he's been up to now, all the work that he's been doing, setting aside private life, coming back to government. Mr. Undersecretary, I just want to say how thankful I am that you were here with us on this Veterans Day. Do you have a final message for the veterans out there, the service members out there, just as we go through this Veterans Day, about from the administration, from your position?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Happy to spend time with you. I suppose my message would be thanks. I already mentioned that the first day I'd come back in to this position, I had an opportunity to sit and listen to in a classified setting, the work that our men and women in uniform do, specifically.
No spillage, no spillage.
No spillage, and no spillage here. And I'm locked vault. But I think the only thing that there is to say on a day like this is thank you to the men and women in uniform. We've got a great administration. We've got a great Secretary of War who's laser focused on the things that matter. And I'm focused on those things too, and grateful for the opportunity to come on and thank them and thank you for your time.
Mr. Undersecretary,
thank you.
Absolute honor.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jay.
Folks, it's very rare when you get a situation like that, and I know that he's not able to talk about it in his official capacity, but we'll let you know that he is the subject of this new documentary that's just come out, and it's over on Salem Now. I want to give everyone an opportunity to go and check it out. It is called Call Sign Courage, and it's at salemnow.com. And it's an incredible look, not just through his career, through his story, but also at the history of communism itself, the history of what communists have done all around the world. And in fact, guys, I'm just going to say it. Let's hit the trailer again, because this thing was too good. What do you say? Do we have it lined up? Can we just hit the trailer again?
Being spied on, the chaplain snooping around my office, and my house being broken into. Things like that don't happen on military bases.
The man I'm interviewing today has 1,200 hours of flying a T-38, followed by the F-15C.
Colonel Matthew Lohmeier.
Matthew Lohmeier. Matthew Lohmeier.
This is not just anybody we're talking about that served the military.
Historically, we've been the best in the world because we've always cared about merit. And it's what made the American military the most lethal military on the planet.
The entire military is preparing for a fight against China.
President Xi is the most ideological leader that China's had since Chairman Mao.
Mao said he doesn't need military people. He has an army of indoctrinated kids.
They asked me what my pronouns were, and he thought it was incredible to see that inclusion and change.
We were starting to be divided by political discourse.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white.
That's what diversity, equity, inclusion is all about.
Inclusion and equality are what's important. That's how we'll win our nation's wars.
We are trained Marxists.
Because of forces coming from Marxism within our own government, it becomes not a foreign threat, it becomes a domestic threat.
The base commander was the ideologue who was pushing a particular political agenda. If you're white, you're part of the problem.
Biggest terror threat in this country is white men.
Violent white supremacy.
One of the greatest obstacles to the success of a Marxist revolutionary cause is a strong, united military force. Someone needed to speak up.
I mean, you look at this, folks. You look at the history of the division, and this is what Marxism does. Marxism comes in to divide. Marxism takes a stable situation, takes a stable group, takes a stable country, a stable military force, and it comes in and divides it. Or should I say even a stable movement, like the conservative movement. And they divide. They pit one side against another. They draw false binaries, and they begin their attacks. This is the essence of Marxism, but people have to understand it is a Marxist tactic, because then once the Marxist divides, the Marxist conquers. So we wrote about this in Unhumans last year, and we were very clear about it. We said first they observe, then they orient, they decide, they act. And these are all stages of the revolution, or the intelligence preparation of the environment. The OPE, the operational preparation of the environment. And when they run through this, it's so obvious because you see them doing it again and again and again everywhere. It is their only tactic. And it's obviously what they were doing to our government. It's obviously what they were doing to our military. And it's obviously what they were doing with our administration. But I gotta say something else. So yesterday was the 2-month anniversary of the murder of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was murdered by a violent leftist. We now know through the investigation, we know through leakers, we know from many others, that this violent leftist was involved with the transsexual community, was involved with the furry community. And rather than focus on the violent left and these trans groups and these furry groups and this subculture, which, by the way, if you go and look, we have the exclusive footage here on Human Events Daily that we can show you, that was provided to us by Turning Point Frontlines, of another Antifa furry that was out there last night on the Berkeley campus. Now people would say, Poso, why are you asking about that? Poso, why are you talking about this? This stuff is gross. This stuff is weird. Well, guess what? Guess what? Charlie Kirk is dead because of this stuff. Charlie Kirk was murdered because of this stuff. Erica and those kids will not have their loving husband and father come home because of this stuff. So I'm sorry if you're a little bit grossed out. I'm sorry if you're a little bit uncomfortable when I talk about it. But guess what? To know the enemy, you must understand the enemy. And to defeat the enemy, you must know the enemy. It is as simple as that. And what do I see out across conservative media? Do I see people focused on this? Do I see people trying to understand the violent left? Do I see people trying to understand the Marxist revolution that, by the way, let's just go down the scoreboard, all right? New York City just fell to Marxism. The state of Virginia just elected a violent Marxist who said that he wants to kill all of our children. 1.7 million people in Virginia, these liberals, all voted for him, okay? And we're told to unite behind a guy like that. Unite with people like that, who said 1.7 million, okay? So all this is happening, New York City, Virginia, Charlie Kirk's murder. And what do I see across the right, across the conservative movement? I see bickering, I see infighting, I see e-drama. I say, oh, you got to argue with the comments. You got to look at this comment. I got to argue with it. I got to argue with that commenter. I got to argue with the internet trolls. I got to argue with, these people online. These people are mad online. I got to respond. No, you got to get your head on straight. We are in a war for Western civilization. The patriots of the United States of America did not die, did not give their lives, did not sacrifice everything. Their families didn't sacrifice everything so that we could go down bickering and complaining instead of fighting back. It's time to fight back. So it's time to get your head on straight. It's time to lock in, and it's time to march forward. It's as simple as that. We have to get it going. Charlie deserved it. Charlie's family deserved it. Charlie's children deserve it. We will lose our country if the patriots do not hold together. It's as simple as that. So on this Veterans Day, when we talk to the veterans, when you think about the veterans, think about yourself too, and think about what you're doing to honor that which they fought for, the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.